I think the RCR service is necessary for a lot of people because grading really is subjective. And like you said, the way that you can really capitalize on grading, no matter the grading company, is to send in cards that are can't miss.
This is GoodSellas, a podcast for collectors who want to learn how to sell the cards they don't want so they can get their hands on the cards they need. In every episode, we uncover the secrets collectors use to move their cards so you can sell more and sell faster. Let's get started.
Hey, this is JB. I'm the CEO of Stack and your host for this episode of GoodSellas. GoodSellas is brought to you by Stack, an app where you can run and launch Stack sales directly from your phone. Using Stack, collectors will claim what they want from your sale, and then Stack will automatically reconcile who claimed what, send out your totals, collect payment, and create the labels so that after a sale, all you have to do is hit print and drop your package at the post office. When I set out to start this podcast, I wanted to highlight people who know how to sell in the hobby to get the things that they like. Jason Dardick is that guy. Jason is the COO of DCI, a card review and grading company, and we'll definitely talk about that. But there are actually a handful of things that I want to talk to Jason about today because he has seller skills and knowledge in a variety of areas, from raw card reviews to moving cards at shows to the actual grading process and why it matters. But before we get into all of that, Jason, welcome to GoodSellas.
Man, thank you so much, JB. First of all, I'm really excited to be a user of Stack. I know you and I kind of came up together on Twitter during the Stack sale days, like when we were both, selling those cards that we didn't necessarily want to keep in our PC on the platform. And, that still goes on today, but, there have been so many innovations to how people can go about selling those cards. And I'm really looking forward to Stack being one of those leading platforms and apps in terms of Stack sales and cards in general.
Yeah, and it's super interesting. By the time this airs, which I think it's going to air like a month from now, who knows what Twitter is going to look like at that time. So I feel like the app couldn't be coming out at a better time for Stack sellers. They may start having to pay premiums to Twitter for commerce that takes place. I know that the Twitter leadership, Elon Musk in particular, applied for the ability to have Twitter verified by the Department of Treasury as a commerce app. I may not be saying all those that terminology right, but it is an interesting time where people may have to look into other options for Stack selling.
Absolutely. Not only for cards, I think, social media is such a powerful tool in all aspects and industries of our life that you see now, the one-click Instagram ads that take you directly to a product, or, the targeted ads on, whatever you're looking at. They make products so accessible. Apps that come out in any industry really are pushing that envelope. And so, it's really interesting for somebody to have that access to a free platform like Twitter and to kind of grow a brand as they, buy and sell or make trades or do whatever they do, to then have to decide, hey, is it worth it for me to then have to pay on top of, maybe the fees I'm already paying in shipping or wherever it is. Definitely interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, the purpose, like I mentioned, of this podcast is to help sellers out. And, one of the things that you have a very keen eye for, I think pun intended, is grading. I know that the organization that you work for, DCI, is moving into actually slabbing cards from solely raw card reviews, which we'll get into actually on this podcast today, because I personally love raw card reviews, especially for higher end cards, and we can talk about that. But now that you're grading and have been grading, whether it's with PSA or a ton of BGS against what I'd recommend for anyone, let's just start there. And for the very green audience, if you will, why would someone want to grade a card?
Yeah. So first of all, to kind of give my background, I know you gave me an awesome introduction. I am that, the head of grading for DCI. So when you say, I kind of come with that background, but that truly is, what I spend, 95% of my time doing is grading cards, looking imperfections in the condition, looking for cards that may have been altered in some case, or, a reproduction or a counterfeit card, something like that. Making sure all the things are ready to go. Even if the card is good to go straight from the factory, there's still ways that you can make it look better. So that's really what I spend my time doing. And the reason I spend my time doing that, kind of the reason that grading is important, is because you can take cards that might not be as rare and make them scarce, if that makes sense. So you can take a card that may have a print run of 100,000, and if it's that one card, it's the only card that gets a gem mint 10, we'll say. It's the only one of those 100,000 cards that is in perfect condition. Well, that card, even though there are 100,000 of them, that one example is now the only one. It's really a way that you can market your card as scarce versus that, maybe not as rare print run. And so the theory behind grading is just obviously making sure that your card is in good condition. And if you have cards that are in great condition, you want to keep them that way. So not only are they being encapsulated, but you can also reduce the print run of the collectible in theory, which should add value.
Yeah, for sure. And that was going to be my question. This is a selling podcast. So how have you seen grading help you or your customers to sell more cards?
Sure. There are a couple different ways I've seen that. One way that I don't think a lot of people necessarily take into consideration when they grade stuff is the return process. Not only does your graded card come back with a serial number in a holder, people know what they're going to get. It's already been reviewed. It's already been encapsulated. It makes it to the fact that the card can't be tampered with for the most part. Even in an RCR, the DCI RCR or raw card review that I can actually show you here. I have a few on my desk. We like to use tamper-proof labels, and that way, a buyer knows, even if they're buying the RCR, they can then feel confident buying that card and knowing that it has not been tampered with from wherever it's coming from. That's one way that I've seen grading really make a difference on people who sell online. Again, the marketing behind taking, something that may not be rare and making it rare in terms of a population or putting that gem mint 10 moniker on it. Things like that can really increase the price in an auction, not only in an auction, but in a negotiation. Being able to kind of use those marketing tools as leverage in a negotiation or as a trade piece, you know what I mean? I think that really helps people value the card. And also, condition being a factor in terms of what that card brings on the open market. Comps are more readily available for that graded card in that condition, whereas if the card is raw, you're still going to kind of have to guess on, hey, is this raw comp comparable condition wise, or is this one, more comparable? So, when it's graded, you kind of get the, hey, it's mint 9, hey, it's gem mint 10, here's the comp for it, here's the value of my card. I've seen that really help people kind of save time.
Yeah, for sure. I think a great example is at one point a long time ago, Jason helped me to review some 1994 Marvel Flair. And these cards in a raw state or even in an 8 or a 9, we're talking about raw, you're looking at $1 to $2. In a 9, you're maybe looking at $15. And in a 10, you're looking at like $200 per card. And the rationale is why, right? And it's just like what you're saying, Jason, is the why is in the 90s, these cards were mass produced. But because they were in the 90s
Absolutely.
and PSA didn't exist at that time, and even if they did, they were small, and BGS also small, if even existing at the time, the number of 10s are very low. When I went to the POP report, which is a population report on PSA's website, the 10s are like population when I first started grading these, because now I've done like 4 hobby boxes because they have been a cash cow for me. But when I first started grading these, the pop reports, we're looking at like pop 4, pop 8, pop 16. And so when I put them to auction, the biggest one was this Mary Jane card where it's Mary Jane MJ from Spider-Man, and she's in like a bikini and got like her hair up. And, I didn't know. I just sent it for a raw card review. You told me it would gem, so I sent it off. And then so the card 10s, I put it up for auction. It's only like a pop 2 or 3. Lo and behold, Steve Aoki, who's a DJ and very wealthy, doesn't have it.
And well known in the hobby.
Yeah, well known in the hobby, has his own soccer set. He doesn't have this card in his collection, I guess, and he gets into a bidding war with someone else, and the card goes for $850. So we're talking about a card that
Awesome.
in its raw state, $1 to $2, and in a 10, because of that artificial, if you will, scarcity, becomes an
100%.
$800 card. And so, I think that really is and it's funny that, we kind of went through it together, but that's my personal experience of how grading can really impact the bottom line of what your return is.
Absolutely. And I would say, as we went through that process, let's just say it took 6 weeks for you to send them in, to get them back from us and send them off, get them back, and then go to auction, you know what I mean? The auction to be realized. Let's just say that's a 6-week process. If you don't necessarily have the cash to sit on, right, for 6 weeks, let's just say you bought that card raw for $2, so not a big investment, right? But let's just say we're not talking about this exact Marvel card. You go out and you buy a $200 card, right? You send it in, you send it back, it goes through the process for 6 weeks. Well, during that 6-week period, you are out that $200 you spent, right? The nice thing about a raw card review, and if I can plug DCI real quick, it's $8 a card. Something that we see really helps people who like to go to shows to sell their cards is the raw card review. Something that is going to bring that instant premium, that same day turnaround in terms of a professional review, if you will, an expert opinion, but allows you to kind of get in and out of that cash that's in the same day or the same weekend, rather than going through that entire encapsulation process. And so that was really our thought process behind the raw card review when grading got so backed up that the big companies couldn't turn these cards around quick enough. There was really a cash flow problem in the hobby at shows. And so people still wanted to know where their cards stood condition-wise, but still wanted to be able to get in and out of it if it wasn't a gem, if that makes sense. And so that's really where raw card reviews, and DCI, we're not the only company that provides those anymore, and we weren't the first company to provide them, in fact. But that's kind of where that idea comes from, is really the turnaround time. And that's the advantage of a raw card review versus grading in terms of, still having your cards condition reviewed by an expert, but not necessarily having to go through that entire process. It typically will not bring as much of a premium, obviously, as a card that's encapsulated. But again, the cost up front versus the turnaround time makes a lot of sense depending on the card.
Yeah, for sure. And, I used it in a slightly different way, which was I had these cards that aren't scarce unless they were high grade. So there's lots of different ways that the raw card review can be used. I've seen people, unwilling to do deals at shows unless the card goes through the DCI RCR and grades out at a certain grade, because it's nerve-wracking. I mean, I remember at a show, I bought a $3,000 Juan Soto card raw, and, it after inspecting it, it's got some damage to it. The guy's like, look, I have a free DCI RCR voucher. Head over there, get it looked at, and you will get it looked at. And depending on what it comes back, that's where we can make the deal based on that.
Conditional deal, yep.
Yeah, like a conditional deal. Exactly. There's a contingency in it. It just really helped, and it didn't need to get encapsulated. And in the end, it was a DCI 7. So I went through with the deal because it was a pretty scarce Soto card that has really bad condition problems, but a DCI 7. So I was like, okay, let's do the deal at a little bit of a lower value, and I'm just going to send it to PSA for authentication instead, because I didn't want a 7 in my collection. So I just sent it for authentication. I still had my card, but I didn't feel like I got ripped off. So an overall very good experience using RCR for a reason other than, to get a deal done.
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for trusting us. But second of all, another thing, and it's just kind of the way that you use that reminds me of people who maybe have been collectors for a long, long time, or maybe you're just getting into the hobby, but have a lot of cards, like just a ton of cards that they want to get graded. They don't know where to start. They know that grading is expensive. RCR is a great way to kind of get a good feel for a large stack of cards. You know what I mean? The way that you submitted your Marvel cards to us was, you basically sent us the whole box and said, hey, tell me which ones are good. Tell me which ones are gem. which ones are mint, and which ones I should sell raw, because I don't want to spend $15 to $25 per card to get 7s and 8s, like you said. And so not only is it important when making a deal, but determining whether or not the card even needs to go to grading or needs encapsulation or is worth paying that extra $15 to $25, that can save you a ton of money on the front end as well. And so not only for the condition review, but really just to help you kind of make that determination on where to spend your money, to where to best spend your money, especially in today's market and economy, can really make a difference.
And if we really break it down, the financials of it, that box, we'll use that box. It's the 1994 Marvel Flair inaugural box or whatever. Back in the 90s, when you bought a hobby box of cards, you got a bazillion cards, right? So I think the box comes with 262 cards. And so of those 262, I pulled out maybe the 50 most valuable, right? So I'm pulling out my Spider-Mans and my Venoms and my Wolverines, the characters that anybody knows. Sorry to go nerdball big time over here. But yeah. But anyway, I think everybody knows. Okay, right? So if you know them, the hobby knows them, right? So Wolverine, Spider-Man, Venom, whatever. And so of the 262, I pull out the valuable ones, and then I send those off to get raw card reviewed. Once those are raw card reviewed, we've whittled it down to out of 262 cards, we've whittled it down to 26 that have a potential at a gem. And therefore, I send those 26, 85% came back as a gem of what Jason told me. Hey, these are borderline 9-10. It's tough with these older cards. Some of them are missing a little bit of paint here and there, but maybe the grader doesn't see that as missing a little bit of paint, because for everyone out there, it is subjective. And so, when 85% of those come back a gem, I only graded 26 cards, but on a $400 box. And by keeping my expenses low on the grading front, I was able to 3-4x what I paid for that box, because I used the RCR approach, even though I paid for both RCR and paid for grading. It came out as a huge net win for me.
That's awesome. And I love to hear stories like that, not only because I think the RCR service is necessary for a lot of people, because grading really is subjective. And like you said, the way that you can really capitalize on grading, no matter the grading company, is to send in cards that are can't miss, right? And it doesn't matter where you send it, it's clean and it's a gem, and that is it. You know what I mean? And there are cards where, maybe you send to one company or another, depending on condition, if you want to take risks. But those cards, again, are the ones that are 95% clean, and then there's some tiny little issue, not a huge scratch or, some stuff like that. So what's really important in that is to, like you said, budget yourself to make sure before you send anything off, that before you even go buy the box, right? To really weigh the financial side, budget yourself. Hey, I'm not only buying the box, but I'm going to pay for RCR, I'm going to pay for grading, and I can still expect to come out ahead. That's what's really important, is kind of having that budget for yourself as well.
And one thing that I wanted to ask you about is the types of cards that you recommend grading, because we've talked about the scarcity piece of it. And while I'm not a big basketball collector, I do love the stuff that you collect, which is super weird, Kobe, Luka insert from Luka's rookie year, but it's obviously not Kobe's rookie card. So it doesn't even have an RC stamp on it, but it's these oddball cards is where you really focus on collecting and grading for your own PC. So if we were to tell the audience, what types of cards you recommend grading, what would you say?
So that's a good question. And I'm happy that, that you bring that up, that I kind of like the oddball weird stuff, because that stuff to me is the true collectible stuff in the hobby, right? So I view that stuff as being the hidden treasures. You know what I mean? First of all, I rip a lot of wax. And so, I like that chase of, I like the chase. If you don't know me, I rip a lot of wax. But I like the chase of pulling that, that truly rare card. Hey, they only made 10 of these, and I know that they printed 10,000 cases of the product. that thrill of pulling something rare, even if it's not a big player, I've got a stack of WNBA gold prisms on my desk right now. You know what I mean? They're probably $50 cards, but every one of them is numbered to 10. And so every time I pull it and you kind of start the pack and you see that bright gold prism, that's just a really fun thrill for me. And so, things like that where it's numbered less than 5 things. I always tell people, if you're collecting it for your PC, it doesn't have to be graded at all. That's where I stand. I have a box full of cards that are a PC box that, again, my gold prisms, like all that other stuff. I've got Anthony Edwards autographs that are in poor condition, kind of like the Soto you said, where they're super rare, but they're not in good condition. And so I don't need them graded. You know what I mean? I have the card. So for cards like that, I would tell you that there is no need to grade whatsoever unless you just feel the need to encapsulate, which is obvious. You can do that with a top loader or one touch, things like that. There are ways to do it that are better than others.
Agree to disagree here.
And don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. As somebody who works for a grading company, I hope you send in all your PC cards for grading. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's, don't get me wrong, but there definitely is not if it's a collectible you don't intend on selling, there's no reason to grade it. Encapsulating is a different story. What I tell people to grade as if they're going to, with the intention to sell, right? With the intention to flip cards, it's got to be a rookie. It's got to be serial numbered. And it's got to be an on-card autograph if it's an autograph card. So it's got to be a rookie card. It's got to be an on-card autograph. And it's got to be a rookie serial numbered to some kind, to whatever number that is. The lower the better. But there's just so much out there now. They're overprinting retail products like crazy. We see all these new checklists. Parallels get added to sets that have been around for years, which can only mean they're printing more of it. That's why I like to tell people to stick to the stuff that there's a finite print run on, and go from there. You know what I mean? Stay away from base. I love silver prisms. There's nothing cooler than a Topps Chrome refractor. There's nothing more classic than that. Unfortunately, they just are too common these days, and they will not hold that value over time, in my opinion.
Yeah, what I've really seen too, and I talked about this on my interview with Brooks when we were talking about consignment, I have found that selling... So like I used to grade a lot of like even low numbered vet cards. And what I've found now is, and I'll use the product that I used on that conversation, which was Finest Flashbacks. I pulled a low numbered Cal Ripken on card auto. And historically I would grade that card because I would think that it could pull a 2 to 3x premium if I got a 10 on it. And now what I'm seeing is the amount of time that it would come back to grade. And I'm even talking 2 to 3 weeks. The excitement for that product, it'll 10, and then that 10 will pull the same price as if I sold that card at auction on like a 1 or 3 day auction upon release. And so for me, vets get out of the house immediately unless it's someone that I'm collecting for myself. Get those out as quickly as I can. The rookie, I subscribe to the same approach, which is only rookies go to grading now.
Yep. And what's interesting about, you say Cal Ripken, right? Something that I think holds value safely is that Hall of Fame veteran auto, even across all sports, right? Like that Cal Ripken, like you said, it's going to come out of a new product, and that product, it's going to sell, we'll just say it's a $100 card, right? It's going to sell for $150 that first week and a half, right? It's going to go back down to 100 eventually. But it's never really going to go less than 100, right? It's never going to become like a $50 card. If that type of stuff, if you're building a collection as somebody who wants to eventually become a dealer at a show, that's the kind of stuff that's great to just throw in a box and hold on to it, right? Like that stuff is just always liquid cash. You can always send autographs to auction. Hall of Fame autos are a great way to kind of keep cash in cards that are just safe. You know what I mean? They've always got a market for it. They always will fit in somebody's collection. It's a lot safer than, say, holding a prospect auto of some no-name first Bowman guy who you're waiting to take off. You know what I mean? For the same price. So if you're really trying to turn cash and keep cards turning into other cards, which is something, I do a lot with Brooks, and I love that episode about consignment. I think it's a great avenue to keep your money turning into, turning cards into other cards. Then absolutely, like you said, I'm sending that Cal Ripken to auction that first day, right? Now,
Yeah, that
if
one's
it's a
not even
big
making
rookie
it to
auto
consignment for me because, I'm like, no, I just got to
Right.
send that. I'm sending that up like ASAP so I can be the first one to market. People get excited about it. It's a card that'll go to auction and make some noise versus probably 2 years ago. You could send that and get a 10 and it would turn from a $100 card into a $300 card. I think those days are done. I don't think that people value a vet or even a Hall of Fame gem the way that they did before. I think it's very much a collectible. Like you're saying, someone just wants an on-card Cal Ripken auto, and they could pay $300
Correct.
premium for a 10, or they could just not. And I think that a lot of times those people
or you
are
could
okay
pay
with
$100
that.
for an encased card. Yeah, exactly. And that's and it's worth, which is good, and somebody as a grader who doesn't work for, let's just say one of the big two, PSA, BGS, big three, SGC, if you will. It's exciting to see people kind of understand that a PSA 10 or a BGS 9.5 doesn't necessarily deserve the premium that it brings on the market for not. And I'm just saying, like, on every card, right? Like, now there are cards where absolutely it does matter. And that's kind of where you get back into the population and scarcity versus it being a rare card. But like we said, if it's a collector's item and something that you don't really care to resell down the line, something like that, or, don't have the time to wait on the grading even 2 weeks, it's something that you want to bring a premium for, just let it rip. Along those same lines, like if you would have pulled a kind of a lesser name rookie, let's just say, I don't know baseball as well, who's a kind of a sleeper rookie this year.
Okay, we'll go with that Braves pitcher because I think pitcher is like kind of always, niche.
Yeah.
So Spencer
Perfect.
Strider.
Okay, let's just say you pull one of his autos first day of release. Are you sending that, or are you going to auction it and take the premium right away?
I'm going to auction that and take the premium right away. I'm pretty much only grading the big name rookies at this point. And for the audience, if you don't know me, I get clowned on by my friends regularly for the types of cards that I used to grade, which was everything and anything under the sun that had a rookie card stamp on it. I've graded all base.
So you've been peer pressured.
Yeah. So I graded all base. We're talking thousands of cards during the boom, right? Like buying complete sets of 2019 and 2020 tops, flagship, and grading, 50 Luis Roberts or 50 Fernando Tatis or whatever. So, I've been down that road and I know what that's like. And I don't follow that same approach anymore. I need big names. A lot of times it needs to either be a product like Finest Flashbacks, which is a limited online release. Like you're not going to catch now. So with Finest Flashbacks, I will say I submitted like the Wander Francos and Julios from that set that were base because it's a limited online release, but you wouldn't catch me submitting, okay, I just got a Julio complete set variation, which there's going to be a zillion of, and I won't send that. So it's all about like identifying, like you said, you kind of have your rationale of what goes in. So yeah, I sent base, but it's based on a limited product. And that goes back to that print run and the amount of population that will be on those cards. I do want to pivot just a little bit here, Jason. I want to talk to you about something that's just like really important to me, which is when during the boom and then shortly afterward, we saw all of these grading companies pop up. I was very vocal in that the ability to grade a card is not just the ability to look at a card and put a numeric value on it, but the authentication process is really what differentiates a grading and authentication company from some guy sitting in his basement with a magnifying glass. Can you explain to the audience, with all of these grading companies that are popping up, why grading companies that have a keen focus on authentication matter so much?
Absolutely. And it's something that is becoming more and more common in our industry every day. You know what I mean? As technology gets better, the counterfeiting gets better. The attention on the hobby grows by the day. Every week there's a new movie or some new record in an auction house, right? That is drawing all of this attention and sensationalism to the hobby, right? And what that brings with it is, the people who are looking to make quick money, who don't have necessarily the means to maybe go and get the authentic versions of these cards and want to print reproductions and put them out onto the market and make money that way. And it really is no different than any other industry. Like if you look at counterfeit shoes or counterfeit bags, things like that, anything that sells is going to get counterfeited, right? Like people want their piece of the pie as well. And as more and more people come into the hobby, there's just going to be more and more counterfeiting. So grading companies, have this immense responsibility to be that determination and that judge of catching these counterfeits and saying, hey, like this, something's up here, this isn't right. You know what I mean? Something that is very important, I guess, is that every day, like we're staying on top of new products. Like a big reason that I rip as much wax as I do is to be familiar with the products. So DCI, we love to say that we're a card company first, right? We started as a group submission company, got into the RCRs. Now we're a grading company. Like we've done everything. And before that, we did dollar boxes and selling singles. Really, that's one of our major concerns as well, is just making sure that the ethics of the hobby and the ethics of grading like are kept intact. You know what I mean? Like we were hobbyists before we were a grading company, and just the souring of the hobby that comes with counterfeiting and alterations, trimmings, recolorings, things like that. It just puts a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It ruins the hobby for everybody, not only the grading company that ends up encapsulating a fake, or the auction house that runs a card that's had a patch switched out a couple times or something like that. It's detrimental to them on a much shorter term basis. Like, yeah, they're probably going to catch hell from some people, but in all likelihood, it's probably not going to shut down their company. Whereas the hobby, that counterfeited card, whatever, let's just say it's a $500,000 card, is out there forever now. And that example is out in the hobby in someone's collection, and it's going to move and change hands numerous times. People are going to get stuck with it, and you never know. The person who's stuck with it may end up buying it totally above ground, above board, and it ends up being a stolen card or a fake card that, somebody gets ripped off and it becomes a big deal. So that reason is another reason that we like to just make sure we're staying on top of everything, and that why counterfeiting is so detrimental to the industry.
Yeah, because the problem is, and for the audience, I'll give some examples here. When you see a card in a slab, and what a slab is the holder for which a card is, as PSA says, it's sonically sealed. So you have to crack it open. Like you can't just pull a card in and out. And the problem is when you see a card in a slab, you trust that card is real, and you can't really inspect it too much yourself. You can look at it through the plastic, but you are trusting it, and you can use it as a negotiation piece in any deal. And then when you lose that trust in the slabs, then all of a sudden the hobby takes a serious hit. And why it's so important is if you're walking around a card show, if someone came up to me with a pristine looking Jordan 86 Fleer Jordan, I'd be like, dude, I'm not doing this deal. Like a raw one, right?
Right.
Like, I'm like,
something's up. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm just not doing this. Whereas if someone comes to me with a PSA 4 Jordan, I'm like, all right, cool. Like I at least know what I'm working with here. But then if I don't trust what's in the slab, then all of a sudden all of that trust is broken. And what we saw happen during the boom was all of these grading companies were popping up. And a lot of times where people were doing their fakes weren't necessarily the Fleer Jordans, because everyone knows to flag for those, but using some, off-kilter type cards, like, I don't even know off the top of my head, but like, some sort of like Steve Young card or something like that. That's just not as popular,
Sure.
But you see it in like an HGA 9.5, and people are like, wow, this is a Steve Young rookie card. It's worth like $100. It doesn't get as many eyes on it, but then they use it as a negotiation tool. And then come to find out, like 50 of them were fakes, right? And then it's like, okay, these are now all over the place. And I worry as much about the guy who got ripped off for $500,000 at an auction house as much as I worry about the dad and his kid who get ripped off for $200. That was like their, you
100%.
know, their 3-month
That was the
card
budget for the hobby.
And they realize, they're like, wow. And now like the joy and fun is gone. You saw it a lot actually in Pokemon cards. Like Pokemon's huge for counterfeits and fakes. And you know, that's where kids and parents are getting ripped off. And then they just lose that affinity right away. And that's why anyone who you grade with, it's not about how good they are at looking at a card. And Jason, you train graders, so you probably know this way better than I do. But like, people can be taught how to look at a card and use 10 things. Here's what we're looking for. We're looking for centering. We're looking for corners. We're looking for edges. We're looking for surface. We're looking for probably a couple of other things in addition to that, like make sure you're checking the backs, blah, 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 blah. You know, if there's borders, this is what you're looking for. If it's a white border, make sure to look at the corners because those corners could be busted and they don't show. Like if it's black, I'm not a grader, but I've done this a few times. But the issue isn't that. The issue is like, are you able to spot if this card is real? Like that is where the actual talent of a grading company comes into play, in my opinion, and what I think should, you know, I don't want to push my opinion on everybody else, but I think that should be the opinion of everybody.
Absolutely. And just from, you know, I can only speak for DCI, right? And like you said, as I train grading and kind of just to open the door to that a little bit, basically like the best way to train graders in my experience is repetition. Like you said, it's just, people can be taught to grade cards. You can learn how to grade cards. It's something that it's just a skill. It's trial and error, and it's thresholds and repetition. And so that's something that is common knowledge. And like you said, that's not the issue. Like anybody can come in and learn how to grade if they want to. What is hard about hiring and like training graders is that authentication process, like you said. And what's really hard is making people like not understand the importance that comes with the position, but it's more finding people who understand and want that responsibility, right? And want to be the one to make that decision and put their name out there as the expert or as the one to say, yeah, like I graded that card and I can tell you that it's authentic or inauthentic or recolored or trimmed or whatever it is. And that's where I think a lot of people get scared off, whether it's a grading company or not. A lot of times, you know, we've had stuff come in where if we don't know, we'll just say we don't know, and we're sorry, but we're not going to grade it. And that's not to say it's not real, but that's to say we are not comfortable saying that it is one way or the other. It's just not within our expertise. And I think that turns a lot of people off hearing that from a grading company. So, you know, you kind of get both sides of the spectrum where there are some things that are so rare and have not been seen for hundreds of years, where it's like, dude, I mean, what on earth is that? You know what I mean? It could be real. I have no idea. Like, I have no fucking idea what that is. And it's like, you know, I know all the big grading companies are the exact same way. Like, there are cards that for a reason they will not grade. And it's not because they don't know, you know, they're not experts in cards. It's because, you know, they know that particular card does not fall within their expertise or their guidelines. You know what I mean? And it's not to offend anybody or to say like, hey, your collectible is not real. It's just more that side of things, again, can be, like you said, very tricky in terms of the authentication side of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite sayings in business is, you know, on my day job, I run a very niche type company where we work with B2B brands that are in tech and they're looking to podcast. And one of the things that I like saying to people is I'd rather turn you down than let you down, right? Like I'd rather turn down your business because I'm not a fit for this, or I don't know for a fact that I will be and I'll be able to deliver in the best way. And I understand that might upset you, but I'd rather do that now and not, in your case, not grade your card. And then you find out it's fake 100%. And you're mad at me, or other people find out it's fake and then they're mad at me. I'd rather just say, hey,
or they're mad at you. Right.
Yeah. You make a deal with someone on this card and then they find out it's fake and then they're mad at you and they're mad at me. It's like just a good way to make sure that, you know, you're not pissing the world off.
Right. So, for example, and this is, I like that phrase as well. This is just something that, like, you know, I'd rather tell you no again, just up front, you know what I mean? And I want to set that expectation. I want to under promise and over deliver rather than over promise and under deliver, right?
Yep.
And that's, just as an example off the top of my head, we just opened our first round of submissions for our slabs, right? And what we are doing is we're only coming out with one, model of the slab that fits 55 point top, chrome standard cards, right? And so patch cards, basically any odd sized card isn't going to fit. And really not a lot of the paper cards, it's really going to be designed more for the chrome 35 to 55 point card, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we're doing is we've eliminated all cards prior to 1986. What that does is it takes out all the tall boy cards, all the odd sized vintage baseball cards, things like that. And we used to do vintage cards, RCRs, all the time. I mean, for years. We have guys on our staff who all they do is vintage, literally. That's it. Vintage baseball, vintage basketball, vintage football, that's it. But anyways, the reason that we're discontinuing that isn't because we don't feel comfortable doing vintage cards or things like that. It's because we simply don't have the slab for it. Like, we can't take in your card and tell you we're going to grade it and encapsulate it and then, hold on to it for 3 years while we develop a new slab or something like that. You know what I mean? Or a new piece. So it's, again, we want to be clear up front, like, hey, only this size card fits. So only, this is what we're promising. This is what we're going to deliver. And it's not because, hey, we have no idea, but it's just because this is what we do. And this is our, our lane. And I think that's important too. You know what I mean? To like you said, not just to tell up front, and it's not a against you type deal. This is what we can provide.
All right. Well, Jason, I had more to go over with you, but we are coming up on our time. So we'll have to do a follow-up episode at some point on how to trade up at a card show, because that was something I want to talk to you about, something Jason's great at. If you want to talk to him about, hey, I know, Jason, you go to a lot of shows, what's your approach to using your cards to get deals done, what have you, please reach out to him. And that's the next question that I have for you is, Jason, I want to give you an opportunity to plug the places that you sell. Obviously, you can talk about DCI, but where should people go to find you?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me on, dude. You're a great friend in the hobby. I'm very excited for Stack to be live and ready to go. I'm a big fan of the GoodSellas podcast, so I'd love to come back on for a follow-up episode. But I am at Jason Dardick. I think my name will be somewhere on here. At Jason Dardick, all one word, on Twitter. That's probably the best place to find me. And then, DCI Grading, any kind of social media platform is just at DCI Grading. I appreciate you being a supporter of DCI Grading and me over the years as well. So anytime you would like to have me back, I am happy to come back and we will mix it up.
Sounds good. Jason, thanks again. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today. It was great having you on GoodSellas.
Thanks for listening to GoodSellas. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along wherever you get your favorite podcasts. To learn more about the hobby and how to sell your cards faster and easier, visit us at stacksales.io. We'll see you next time.